Night, 973 ESPN FM, the 973 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. We are live in your world for another Hump Day edition of the show. Dave Weinberg back for a Weinberg Wednesday today at 6:15. So we'll get to Dave in about 15 minutes from now. Bryan Toporek from Forbes Sports, co-host of the NBA podcast. He will join us coming up at 6:40 with Sixers basketball, because we got to talk some Sixers ball tonight. You know, there's some interesting stuff, and poor Brian, he has to come on every time there's some Ben Simmons news. But hey, you know, he says yes every time, so we appreciate him joining the show. Of course, you can join the conversation, whatever's on your mind. Eagles, Sixers, whatever's going on in the world of sports. 609-403-0973 is the text board. You can DM the show to the 973 ESPN mobile app. It's free. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And of course, we are live on YouTube and Twitter at 973 ESPN. I'm going to get to the Sixers stuff first, because we're going to go deeper with the Eagles stuff when Dave Weinberg joins us coming up in about 13 minutes from now. But I want to hit on the Sixers first real quick with you guys, because for those who may or may not have seen the story, or maybe you're getting bits and pieces of it, here's the rundown. So Ben Simmons has not been practicing. He's been going and getting assistance from the NBA PA with his, what he calls getting his mental situation figured out. Okay, fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But according to reports, when Daryl Morey approached Ben Simmons to ask him about, hey, you know, how you doing? Are you coming back anytime soon? And Simmons said that he's not ready to play, that he's going to continue to get professional help, and there's no timetable on him returning to the floor. And the team wanted to receive some sort of feedback from Ben Simmons on the process. But apparently, Ben Simmons has been very disinterested in communicating that with the Sixers. Now, I will preface this by saying, as I have always said, mental health is a very delicate, borderline taboo subject for a lot of people, because there are a lot of people who deal with it on varying levels, and there are a lot of people who I call Neanderthals, who can't wrap their head around a world where anybody's life is difficult because they think that only their life is difficult. So I understand that is part of the reality of the world we live in. So with that disclaimer out of the way, Ben Simmons getting professional help is not the problem to me. The problem to me is his disinterest in communicating his situation with the Sixers, except when the president of the organization, Daryl Morey, has to walk up to him and ask for an update. This is the problem with Ben Simmons. And this is not a mental health issue. This is not, I don't want to hear that. Okay? This is a being an adult professional issue, because there are people every day who go to work with something going on in their life that is prohibiting them from being the best version of themselves. All right? There is not a person, there are a lot of people that you have no idea about who are going through things that you will never know about. But you never have to hear about it, because they either communicate it to the people who are their immediate bosses, or because they just handle their business and they work through their problems. Ben Simmons is treating his personal situation like it's another episode of a soap opera. And that's where I have a problem with this. I don't think Ben understands or wants to understand that part of being an adult, part of being a grown-up, is communicating with people. Ben doesn't seem to want to understand, wrap his head around, or even care that what he is doing right now is hurting his trade value. It is hurting how people perceive him. I've said this phrase multiple times. Perception is reality. And if you are Ben Simmons, you cannot walk into a meeting and have an honest conversation unless you're first willing to admit that other teams around the league are watching the situation because they want to know, if I trade for Ben Simmons, is Ben going to show up? Am I getting the version of Ben Simmons that I saw before the 7-game series with the Atlanta Hawks last year? And I think it's a fair question to ask. Ben wants to be traded. I get that. We all get that. Every Sixer fan wants Ben Simmons gone. But like Odell Beckham Jr. right now is facing with the Browns, unless you are a free agent, teams don't want to trade for someone that they're not sure who and what they are anymore. You want to know why OBJ is still a Brown? Because if I'm an NFL team, I don't know what version of OBJ I'm getting. Am I getting the Odell Beckham Jr. that was a superstar with the Giants? Am I getting the OBJ that was willing to block for Nick Chubb and celebrate with his teammates? Am I getting the OBJ that's been injured numerous times over the last few years? Am I getting the OBJ whose dad is putting 11-minute videos and retweeting them and reposting them, basically saying that, well, Baker Mayfield is going out of his way to not throw the ball to my son? And then LeBron James is jumping on social media saying that OBJ is still a wide receiver one. Teams don't know what version of Odell are they getting. We saw this over a decade ago with a player who's much better than OBJ, Randy Moss. Remember the whole thing with Randy Moss? He was a legend with the Vikings, gets traded to the Raiders. We think his career is going nowhere, goes to the Patriots, revives his career, looks like a Hall of Famer again. And then he bounced around. Titans, Vikings again, and then he fizzled out of the league. To me, OBJ is going through a similar situation. Superstar, down, up, down, up, down. I don't know what we're getting with him. And Ben Simmons is in a similar predicament. Ben Simmons does not understand that perception is reality. You have to show people that you are a tradable commodity. No one wants to trade for the unknown. And the Sixers are not giving Ben Simmons up for a bag of basketballs. I'm sorry to some of you out there. You don't give up a guy who is a 3-time All-Star, 2-time NBA defensive first-team player for nothing. You have to get something legitimate in return for him. And Ben Simmons' lack of desire to communicate, disinterest in engagement is making him look bad. And if Ben doesn't understand that, then maybe he needs to get more therapy. Or maybe the person who he is getting professional help from is doing a bad job. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Seattle. We'll get to your messages a little bit later in the show. Coming up on the other side, Dave Weinberg will join us for another edition of Weinberg Wednesday. Then at 6:40 tonight, we will be joined by Bryan Toporek from the NBA podcast and 4 Sports NBA writer. Sixers basketball, 7 p.m. tonight. No Simmons, no Tobias Harris. I wonder what the lineup's going to look like tonight. Embiid's supposed to be back, but no Tobias. Are they going with the small ball lineup, or do they put Niang back in Niang in the starting lineup? I'm going to be interested to see what this lineup looks like tonight. We'll get into all that throughout the show here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night.
This is the radio home for Philadelphia Eagles football. It's week 9 of the 2021 season with the Eagles hosting the LA Chargers at the Link.
Pushes, shoves, into the end zone, Boston Scott.
Pre-game coverage begins this Sunday at 3 p.m. Merrill and Mike call all the action starting at 4:05. This is where the Eagles play. 97.3 ESPN, South Jersey's Eagles station.
It's game time. Football season is in full swing, and you can catch all the NFL action at the FanDuel Sportsbook in Bally's Hotel and Casino, Atlantic City. It's time to get in on all the games you love. Experience sports betting done right with live streaming games, food and beverage, self-service betting kiosks, and more. Get your game face on and score big this weekend when you bet at FanDuel Sportsbook in Bally's off the boardwalk, Atlantic City. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here, hanging out with you guys, leading up the Sixers basketball tonight, 7 p.m. Taking on the Chicago Bulls here on 97.3 ESPN FM. We'll get to your thoughts and comments in a little bit. Keep them coming in. 609-403-0973 is the text board. We got a busy show here, so we want to get to Dave Weinberg for an edition of Weinberg Wednesday on a Wednesday here on 97.3 ESPN. Get a little Eagles talk with Dave as the Eagles got to win. Dave, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Josh. I just became a grandfather for the third time today, so I'm really happy.
Well, congratulations. I'm glad
Thank
to hear
you.
that's all good on your front because let's be realistic. I got to be honest with you. I didn't think the Eagles were going to win this past Sunday because I
Me
had
neither.
listen, and I think this gets to the first question. Mike Gill asked me before the end of his show, and I told him, I was like, look, I think, Dave, you've been very consistent in the fact that we don't know if we can trust Nick Sirianni. And all of a sudden, he decides to run the football, which is every Eagle fan's dream, right? So it's like, I just don't know. Is that something that's sustainable we saw on Sunday, or do we think that was a one-off?
Good question, Josh. Like you said, he's been very unpredictable. Just when you think he's going to do one thing, he does something else. I never expect, especially with Miles Sanders being out, I never expected him to run the ball against the Lions. But to his credit, I guess he saw something that made him think that he could do it. And it was a great game plan. Finally took some pressure off of Jalen Hurts, who didn't have to do everything by himself for a change. And credit to Jonathan Gannon, who actually blitzed once in a while. So that was a pleasant surprise also. But yeah, I don't really know what to expect going forward. Knowing, I wouldn't be totally shocked if they just go right back to what they were doing before. I don't know.
Well, I'll get to the defense in a minute because to me, the defense, I actually feel like I have a better understanding of what's going on and not going on there than the offense because the offense makes no sense. You didn't play Jordan Howard all year, right? We haven't
He was
seen
on
him
practice squad, right? Yeah.
Right, he's been seeing the practice squad all year, and all of a sudden he comes in, he's rushing for touchdowns, 236 yards on the ground, almost 40 rush attempts between all three running backs, and I'm just like, I mean, did Sirianni what is going on here? And when they ask him this week, is that something you can do moving forward? He goes, well, yeah, sure it is. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a real reassuring answer.
Yeah, maybe he saw something on Jordan Howard that the fact that he played for Chicago, maybe he had some success against the NFC North in the past. I don't know. But yeah, Jordan is a very powerful between the tackles, move the chains kind of guy. He just wasn't used that much and obviously not used at all this year. So, but, credit to Sirianni for figuring out, we don't have Miles Sanders. We got to bring up somebody else. So, but I didn't expect him to get that many carries. That was a complete surprise.
Moving forward, let's say they run the ball again this Sunday, which would be smart because the Chargers have the worst run defense in the NFL. If we start becoming a running team, here's my concern, Dave. Sirianni was handpicked by the owner. The owner said, I don't want Doug Peterson anymore. I'm going to hire this young guy. And we know the last time Jordan Howard had a big game, according to reports, Laurie was not happy and told Doug Peterson, you ran the ball too much. So is there a situation where if they keep running the ball, which we know is the right thing to do, that the owner starts meddling again?
That's a good point. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. And this whole season is supposed to be about the development of Jalen Hurts to be able to figure out whether he's your franchise quarterback or not. Well, if you're going to run the ball 30, 40 times, you're not going to find that out. And I guess it's an interesting dilemma. Do you run the ball to have a best shot at winning, or do you go back to what you're doing before and maybe not have a greatest chance to win, but you get to find out whether Jalen Hurts is your guy or not? Yeah, it's a really interesting debate going forward. I'm not sure how they're going to play it, but you're right. I mean, if Laurie knows as much as well as anyone that this is a passing league, that's what people want to see. They don't want to see that 3 yards and a cloud of dust kind of attack, even though if it is effective. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. You're right.
The other thing is, it seems like the Eagles want their cake and eat it too, Dave. They released Eric Wilson today. They are playing Davion Taylor more and more, and you could tell Taylor is still raw as an NFL player. He is nowhere near what a player would be. There's a reason for that. Obviously, he barely played any high school football. college football is the first time he played legitimate football in his career.
Sure.
So he's behind the curve. But it seems like the Eagles, they want to play the young guys so they get the reps, but they're also trying to go out there and win. So it's like they're trying to balance these two things, and I don't know how sustainable that is.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, if you're realistic, Josh, they're not going to make the playoffs, I don't think, anyway. They win a couple more games here and there, but nothing's a given in this league, as you know. Based on the way the Giants played the other night, people were automatically assuming they were going to win, but then, who knows now? And the Jets beating the Bengals, that kind of throws a wrench in everything too. So, I mean, there are no more guaranteed wins out there, just as there are no guaranteed losses either. There's probably a couple, but yeah, it's a real interesting dilemma that they have. Whether you, like you said, do you play the young guys, take your lumps, or do you see a possibility of sneaking into a wild card spot? And if so, then you got to take maybe a little bit of a different approach and play the veterans a little more. I personally think they're better off just playing the youngsters and seeing what they have going for the future.
Dave Weinberg joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN for another edition of Weinberg Wednesday at Dave Weinberg 19 on Twitter. Check out his extra point columns over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Dave, I mentioned we would get to the defense because to me, the defense, I can understand what's going on with the defense way more because to me, it's very simple. When Gannon lets his dogs hunt, when he lets the Predators go after people, whether it's the 49ers game, whether it's the Lions game, whether it's the Falcons game, we've seen this defense when they're not passive, when they're not waiting for everybody to come to them, they're fine. But when he insists on playing this deep two-shell defense where he has everybody standing 6, 10, 12 yards away playing this, well, we're hoping for the best zone defense, they get destroyed. But when they say, okay, Josh Sweat, go after the quarterback. Hey, Davion Taylor, just go chase the dude with the ball in his hand. Hey, Darius Slay, you're a really, really good cornerback. Why don't you lock down the man across from you? The defense seems to be fine. It just seems like when Gannon insists on playing this stupid passive defense, that's when everything goes wrong. Do we still have you, Dave? We just lost Dave Weinberg there for a minute. We'll wait for him to reconnect. Man, I thought I was making a good point. That's why he was not saying anything. And then we lost him. I thought, Dave was just sitting there listening to me and it was like, oh, he's making a good point. I'm thinking I'm making a point here. And then Dave gave me nothing in response. So, we'll wait for him to reconnect here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you guys. We'll wait for Dave to reconnect because I don't know where we lost him or where we recalibrated. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking I'm making a good point here, and then Dave's going to be like, yeah, man, it's a good point you just made. And then he gave me nothing. I mean, for all I know, I could have made a horrible point, and Dave could have been ready to just rip me apart, but his connection got dropped. So we'll wait for him to reconnect here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Game Night being brought to you by my friends over at the FanDuel Sportsbook at Bally's Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City. Bet all the action and style this football season and all basketball season through the winter at the state-of-the-art FanDuel Sportsbook just off the boardwalk at Bally's Atlantic City. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, I think we got Dave Weinberg back now. We got you now, Dave?
Yeah, sorry about that, Josh. I don't know what happened there.
I was saying to the audience, I thought I was making a good point. I thought you were going to go on here and be like, yeah, man, that's a good point. And then we lost you. I mean, for all I know, you could have been, you might have been ready to just pounce on me for what I was saying.
No, I was agreeing with you. You did have a great point about the defense, being aggressive.
Yeah, go ahead.
If they're, you're right. It made a lot of sense when you let Josh Sweat, you let Derek Barnett, Fletcher Cox, what have you, get after the quarterback. Davion Taylor, Darius Slay, playing the aggressive defense. It seems like that's a formula that works. Why they would go back to the other way, I have no idea. But if they do, Justin Herbert's going to light them up. So they're better off just playing the way they played against the Lions and taking the chances, I think.
And the other thing is they're at home, Dave. They haven't won a home game at all this year. Every
No,
game
how
they've
about that,
won
huh?
is on the road.
Yep.
I can't remember a time, and listen, you've covered the Eagles, since the 90s, and I can't remember a time this team couldn't win a home game. I feel like there was always at least like a random home game or two by this point they would have won in a past season just because the crowd gets so loud and the other team, maybe it's a West Coast, the East Coast, whatever it may be. The fact they haven't won a home game this year to me is perplexing.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. I mean, you would think most teams are able to feed off of the hometown fans, feed off that energy and that excitement that the crowd brings. Detroit being one of the exceptions, of course, because they got booed off the field. But then again, that works both ways in Philadelphia, though. If you're not playing well, you're going to get booed off the field, too, just like the Lions were. And, I've seen that happen more than once. And maybe just because it's such a young team, like we mentioned before, maybe they can't handle that kind of thing just yet. They're not ready to handle that kind of adversity and pressure from their own fans. But if they do get a lead and they can, ramp up the excitement a little bit, then I think they might be able to pull out a win. But I mean, I don't see it this week, but you're right. I mean, there's going to be a home win eventually, I would think, but it's going to take a while, maybe.
Hey, look, the Jets won last week and they were at home, and that was with Mike
Yep.
White, for goodness sake, against a very good Bengals team. So, I mean, listen, if the Jets and Mike White can win a game at home, I'm sure the Eagles can win a game at home.
Yeah, you would think so.
Dave, I want to switch over from the football to baseball because obviously the World Series finished last night. The Braves just went out there and just said, we are not playing any more games. We're going to smash our way to a win. I feel like, Dave, that people are overlooking the fact that the Braves weren't supposed to win a World Series because Ronald Acuna went down in July. They had to make all those trades. I mean, everyone they traded for contributed. Soler in this series, Rosario in the NLCS, everyone they traded for made a contribution. I feel like that gets overlooked. The fact that the Braves said, look, we're not conceding this season. We're still trying to win. And in a world where everyone is about, making trades for prospects and getting the best guy in free agency, the Braves almost kind of did it the old fashioned way. They just said, look, we got to make some deals. We're trying to win here.
Yeah, and even got Jock Peterson at his pearl necklace too, right? But yeah, it's I mean, all credit to the Braves. I mean, like you said, they did exactly what they needed to do when they had some injuries. They went out and filled the gaps. They weren't ready to retreat, to fold the tent, so to speak, and it really paid off for them. I was really happy for them. It's been a long time. 1995, I think, was the last time they won.
Right. Yep.
And they really deserved it, and it really bodes well for the future for them too. They still have a lot of young players. That's going to make things very difficult for the Phillies and the rest of the NL East, especially when Acuna comes back. So, but yeah, it was great to see. I was really excited, and I know you were kind of pulling for Dusty Baker, but I'm kind of glad the Astros got it handed to him.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's not like I had I was a major dog in the race. It's not like I was going to be upset
I got you,
either way. It's just, for me, I just like to see guys like Dusty Baker get their opportunities. That's for me, I'm a little old school in the fact that I like to see the guy who's hung around and paid their dues and finally gets their shot. They get their shot. Like when the Nationals won a couple of years ago, I like seeing Ryan Zimmerman all happy and stuff.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
I gotcha.
That's just kind of how I am with baseball. But Dave, part of the problem is there's speculation out there that there might be a delayed season next year because apparently the negotiations for the collective bargaining agreement have hit a huge stonewall. And I got to wonder, Dave, with the way the world is right now, I mean, can baseball survive another labor impasse?
Are you there?
Yeah, I got you now. You hear me?
Yep, I can. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Baseball can't seem to get out of its own way a lot. They just whatever can go wrong with them, whether they're going up against the NFL or NCAA football or playing games, at the wrong times and games take forever. Most of the people probably didn't see the win last night because they were asleep because it always takes over 3 hours to play a game. And yeah, this would do them no favors. I don't know. I'm sure baseball will survive, but this is a hit that they really can't afford to take. They nearly lost the fans a couple of years ago with a work stoppage, and it took a long time to get even a portion of that fan base back. If they do that again, uh, it's really gonna hurt the game. It really is.
I just don't understand why people don't learn from history, Dave. Like, it's very
Yeah.
simple. You know what I mean? Like, we know what's happened. We know how it hurt baseball. I don't understand like why both sides are so steadfast. Like, I mean, we saw it last year too with the COVID situation. Like, baseball was the one sport where the owners and the players were just like bucking heads. It's like, hey man, we're all in this together. I mean, in the COVID
Yep.
environment and everything, but yet these guys couldn't get along about anything.
Now, the baseball is just one of those sports where I don't know what it is that both sides are very stubborn. They're not willing to give an inch on anything, and it really hurts the game. Like you said, there should be some cooperation. Both sides have to realize that it takes cooperation and a little give and take on both sides to make the sport. I mean, the sport's taking hits, at every level as it is. I mean, I think we might have mentioned it before. Like my local Little League team, Little League had 2 teams this year, whereas 20 years ago they had 22, 23 teams. It's just that baseball's dying as a sport as it is at the grassroots level. You have to find a way to get those kids back onto the field, to put down. I don't want to talk bad about other sports, but me being a baseball guy, I'd rather see them playing baseball than some other sport, I guess. And I just they got to find a way, and they have to be able to get those kids excited about baseball again, and to look forward to watching the stars play. And when they're sitting at home not doing anything, that's really going to be that's really going to disrupt the game and really going to hurt it.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I don't even know what's worse anymore, Dave. I don't know if it's worse if they're not playing or the fact that the games just never end at a reasonable time of night.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I know. I hate to sound old, but there was a time when they actually played World Series games in the afternoon on occasion. I remember being like in 5th and 6th grade. Cardinals and the Tigers were in the '68 World Series, I believe it was, and our teacher actually rolled a TV into the classroom and let us watch the game. Yeah, it was really cool. And I saw Bob Gibson and Al Kaline and those guys, and even the year before with Carl Yastrzemski and the Red Sox. And I would wish they would do it at least like maybe 2 of the games. They should be in the afternoons, I would think, just to give the kids something, a reason, like you said. So I wanted to take a nap to watch the games anymore.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just started at 7:00, I mean, you have a chance for it to be reasonable. This idea that it has to be like 8:00, 8:30, especially when Atlanta and Houston are in the World Series. These are 2 teams that are in the Eastern and Central time zones. You're not accommodating a West Coast audience at this point.
That's true. Yeah, very true. Yep. That makes too much sense, though. Baseball.
Yeah, exactly. It makes too much sense. Dave Weinberg, follow him on Twitter at Dave Weinberg19. Check out his extra point columns at 97.3 ESPN.com. He joins us each every week for a Weinberg Wednesday here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. And Dave, we appreciate you jumping on. We'll catch up with you next week, and we'll see if Sirianni actually does the right thing this Sunday.
Yeah, I'd be interesting to see what happens. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it.
Dave Weinberg joined us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Let's squeeze in a couple of text messages before we get to Bryan Toporek from the NBA podcast and, of course, Forbes Sports NBA writer. Of course, Sixers coming up at 7:00 tonight on 97.3 ESPN. A couple of texts came in a little bit earlier. We talked about Ben Simmons at 609-403-0973. Tim from Millville chimes in and says, just like when Ben needed to work on his shot, instead of using team coaches, he uses his own shot coach. Now he won't get help from team doctors. Instead, he uses doctors from the Players Associations. Has to be one of the most hard-headed players in Philadelphia sports history. That's for Tim in Millville. Yeah, it's hard to decipher with Ben, Tim in Millville. It's hard to decipher. Is Ben just this stubborn, or is Ben Simmons, is he just that clueless? Like, I would assume, and again, I'm not in his sessions getting professional help, but I would assume that the person who he's getting help from would tell Ben, hey, Ben, you need to handle your professional image in a certain way. And here's some suggestions how you do it. This is how you communicate with people. This is how you work through these things. I don't know what they're telling him in those meetings because it seems like Ben still doesn't understand certain things. Mike in Ocean City chimes in and says, Josh, if Ben Simmons is not fully and wholeheartedly working to seek mental health help, it begins to be questionable. I in no way diminish the validity of mental health issues. I just question Ben's motives, guidance, and truth. I'm sorry to say that, but Ben Simmons is not disproving the skepticism. That's from Mike in Ocean City. Listen, Mike, everything you said is valid. There's nothing you said that's invalid because seeking mental health help means that you're also working on how that impacts the people around you. And it seems like Ben doesn't seem to get that. And the skepticism is always going to be there until Ben speaks publicly about it or Ben does something to show that the help he's getting is actually going somewhere. And one more message in here from Dan and EHT at 609-403-0973 says, think about Ben throughout his time with the Sixers. He never did off-season workouts with the team assistants. He always did it independently. This is not surprising at all. I am not concerned, says Dan EHT, with the Ben Simmons situation. He will be traded at the deadline. It will work out for both sides. I don't remember there being a trade that was extremely lopsided in the NBA. The NBA is a great run organization. It will make sure things are done correctly. Well, I will give you a trade, Dan, and I will never forget. It's ingrained in many Sixer fans' memory, the Charles Barkley trade. When the Sixers traded Barkley to Phoenix for Andrew Lang, Jeff Hornacek, and Tim Perry. That was an extremely lopsided trade. The Sixers completely failed that trade. So all I say to Daryl Morey is, don't get me Lang, Hornacek, and Perry. You don't want to see that in the situation. You know, the Chris Paul trade where they traded like 7-8 random dudes to the Clippers for Chris Paul. You know, there have been lopsided trades. I think that the problem is that you got to find out, is Ben Simmons serious about being the best version of himself? If he is, it's easier to trade him, in my opinion. If it's not, it's going to be hard. All right, Bryan Toporek joins us next. Talk more about the Sixers as Sixers take on the Bulls tonight at 7 p.m. Coming up next here on 97.3 ESPN FM. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night.
It's Sixers basketball tonight on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Embiid beyond the arc, fires for three. It's up and good. Embiid with a clutch triple.
The Sixers host the Chicago Bulls. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN.
If you suspect you have mold in your home, water damage in your basement or crawl space, or a foundation problem, call Perfect Basement. If you're selling your home, address the problems before your buyer discovers them. Perfect Basement provides free, no-pressure inspections for waterproofing, mold remediation, and foundation repair. They're family-owned in South Jersey, licensed and certified, and accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Visit perfectbasement.com and check out their exclusive price guarantee and great reviews. That's perfectbasement.com.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook at Bally's Casino in Atlantic City. Bet all the action style this football and basketball season all winter long at the state-of-the-art FanDuel Sportsbook just off the boardwalk at Bally's, Atlantic City. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. The one team that's going to gamble on a lot of things right now is the 76ers. Ben Simmons, who knows if he's ever coming back. Tobias Harris out in the COVID protocols. Joel Embiid had to get a scheduled rest day. So Sixers are back in action tonight against a pretty good Bulls team, and talk more about it. Bryan Toporek, the co-host of the NBA podcast, also Forbes Sports NBA writer, joins us right now on 97.3 ESPN. Bryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I would be doing better if I didn't have a Ben Simmons question for you, but
always
I do have to start there because the Shams report and other reports about the Ben Simmons situation are honestly concerning, because on one hand it's like, okay, great, he's getting help, he's talking to somebody, but the fact that he doesn't want to communicate that situation with the Sixers, I almost wonder, like, is he really taking the therapy to heart? Like, are they not talking to him in the sections about, I mean, listen, I'm not saying I'm an expert on mental health, but one of the things they tell you when you get therapy is you have to communicate with the people who are impacted in your life. And if Ben Simmons isn't communicating and Daryl has to corner him to be like, hey man, how you doing? What's going on? It just really is a bad look, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate specifically what's going on with Ben, because I know there's some question of, like, is any of this for real? And, like, I don't think any of us are in a place to say it one way or the other. I will say I'm with you in thinking, like, you know, it's great for Ben to be getting the help that he seems to need, or, you know, wants to have. But I also don't blame the Sixers for wanting to know, like, hey, you know, we're being supportive, but are you just going to be out for the next 4 years? Like, do you have any semblance of an idea when you might be ready to play basketball again? And I don't necessarily know what the next step is in this process. It wouldn't surprise me if it continues going down this road, if, you know, the Sixers ask the NBA or the NBPA, the Players Association, to get involved here. Ramona Shelburne yesterday of ESPN was the one who reported that he isn't seeing Sixers mental health professionals. He's seeing professionals provided from the Players Association. So I don't think we're anywhere near a resolution here, and I would expect that it blossoms into an even bigger issue down the road.
Does it make sense, or maybe I'm asking the question right? I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking, and then you can react. I'm not going to even ask the question.
Okay.
I don't think Ben understands the concept of perception is reality. Because to me, if I want to put myself in a position to get another job, then I do everything in my power to make myself look good to a potential employer, right? That's what most normal people do. Ben thinks that the Sixers should be able to trade him, and he has no impact on his trade value. And to me, the best situation for Ben to be traded is for him to get back on the court and show that, hey, I'm still a 3-time All-Star. I am here. Come trade for me. And it's like, I don't think Ben understands that.
Right. I mean, you know, there is the concern of, would he damage his trade value further by returning? And I never really bought into that. I think if we get into the playoffs and he's the same player that he was all the time, then maybe that's the case, and teams would only be, you know, more resolute in believing this guy is not a critical piece of a championship contender. But during the regular season and during the playoffs are two very different things. And during the regular season, I feel like I've been saying this all summer. Ben Simmons is a 3-time All-Star for a reason. In the regular season, teams aren't as locked in defensively. You can get out and transition more where he's really effective. He's among the league leaders in assisted 3-point field goals. He's one of the best defensive players in the league, was the runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year last year. So I think there's a lot of good that he could show on the court that would remind teams, hey, this is all that he can provide, even if he is limited as a scorer, won't take 3-pointers, is not a great free throw shooter. And I think right now it's really just a waiting game between Ben, the Sixers, and the overall trade market. Come December 15th, all the guys who signed as free agents this summer, they're eligible to be traded. So that will widen the scope of guys who could be involved in potential deals. And I think, the Sixers right now are, especially after getting off to a pretty good start to the season, they probably aren't feeling immediate pressured. Like, we need to trade this guy, next week because we're 1-6 and the season is already like almost off the rails. And they're still probably hoping for a sea change somewhere else from Damian Lillard or Bradley Beal or one of these other big stars. And, unfortunately for them, the Wizards and the Bulls have also looked pretty good to start the year. And now there's this story out today from Chris Haynes of Yahoo Sports all about Damian Lillard, where, it doesn't sound like he's going anywhere either. So, my big question now is like, what's the plan B? Because Daryl went on the radio recently and said, like, we're not trading him unless it's for a difference maker. And there just isn't an obvious option if it's not one of Lillard, Beal, or Levine. So, do they have a plan B or a plan C of like, if we're not trading him for, one of these guys and he's not willing to come back or he's not going to come back anytime soon, like, do you have to pivot at some point?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Haynes piece because I brought up the Athletic piece a few weeks ago, and I mentioned after Lillard's game on Monday night, I said, look, the Sixers and Sixer fans, they're like the dude who keeps trying to get the girl to ask them out. They keep trying to take her out, but she just keeps saying no. And then one day they see a ring on her finger and they're like, well, you shouldn't marry that guy. You should be going out with me. And she's like, I've literally told you no like 20 times. And it's like, people don't want to accept that. People got so mad that I used that analogy because I think they're probably the same people who do that. But anyway, but still the point is that, like, to me, plan B, because Lillard isn't leaving Portland at this point, and I think most reasonable people understand that. To me, Brian, plan B is, like you just said, December 15th, when you have a team that's 10-20 or 14-14 that says we need to make a trade, then people can start having this conversation. I think Morey is literally waiting to see how the market plays out. That's my personal perspective.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, it's, there aren't that many guys that signed this summer that I could see being like the final missing piece of a trade. So that's the one hang up I have on waiting until December 15th. Like, I don't know who that missing ingredient is unless it's like, you're going with the Knicks and you're trying to get one of Evan Fournier or Kemba Walker. That would make sense. But, a lot of the other teams that the Sixers have been engaged with, they have their guys under contract. They didn't sign them this summer. They're eligible to be traded right now. So I think what you said is right. You're just trying to see how the season plays out, see which teams, thought they were going to be better than they are. And then, does that force like what we're seeing in Boston right now, right? Like with, Marcus Smart already calling out Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and they're 2-5. And if dysfunction like that bubbles up somewhere else, I don't think Ben Simmons and the Sixers are going to, or I don't think Ben Simmons is going to Boston necessarily, but, if another team like the Pacers are 2-6 right now, they went in with higher hopes than that. The Spurs are 2-5. I continue to circle them as one of the most logical Ben Simmons landing spots. And, you get to see players in actions now. So you get to see, how did some of these guys develop over the offseason? Is our perception of, let's say, Devin Vassell, DeJounte Murray, is it different than what this player actually looks like now? Did they get significantly better such that we can actually convince ourselves, we might not be getting the all-star difference maker, but like 2 or 3 of these role players could turn into actually pretty good starters, and that might be enough.
Bryan Toporek joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at @Toporek on Twitter. Make sure you download, subscribe to the NBA podcast. And of course, he joins us as Sixers are preparing to play the Bulls tonight. The starting lineup is out, Brian, and I'm intrigued. I don't love the lineup, but I'm intrigued because it's Maxey, Curry, Korkmaz, Thibault, and Embiid, because no Danny Green, because he's got some injury that I'm still confused about what exactly is wrong with him. Obviously, Tobias Harris, which I understand much more, is in the COVID protocols. And of course, no Ben Simmons. So I'm intrigued to see what happens tonight, because this is a good Bulls team. And what you're basically going out there and saying, it's Joel and the band of misfit toys against a pretty good Bulls team.
Well, hey, it worked the other night against Portland, right? Even without Joel. So
right.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see it as well. I mean, I know even dating back to last year, Doc was bemoaning the lack of forward depth behind Ben and Tobias. So to be without both of those guys, Tobias, it sounds like, isn't coming back until next week at the earliest. Ben, as we covered, who knows? So you don't have a ton of great options here in terms of, you can't play a bunch of traditional lineups. So I thought it was either going to be Thibault or Niang at the 4. They're going small, which is going to be pretty fun, honestly. Having Maxey, Curry, Korkmaz can all light it up from the backcourt, and then it's still going to run through Embiid. So defensively, I think there could be some concerns. We'll see how it works out, but yeah, I think this should be a really fun game tonight.
Before I let you go, and I love to play this game with you, rank the Eastern Conference as of right now.
Oh man. I mean, I still, until someone knocks off the Bucks, I still put them at the top. I know they've had an uneven start to the season, but they've had a lot of injury issues. I think a fully healthy Bucks team, still the best team in the East. The Nets, again, giant question marks there with Kyrie, like fully healthy. I think they are still the 2 best teams in the East. Miami, I think, is quickly moving up there. I think they're clearly the 3rd best team right now, and you can make an argument that they would have a chance to knock off one of those top 2 ones. Tyler Hero has looked really good to start the year after some questions about him last year. So, depth continues to be an issue there if any of their big guys get hurt, but Kyle Lowry has fit exactly how you would have expected him to fit there. Bulls, man, I mean, I was higher on the Bulls than I think a lot of people, but I didn't have them high enough. I don't think they are a legit, really good team. Go really deep. The Patrick Williams injury is a bummer, but otherwise, I mean, DeMar has looked awesome there. So was Lonzo. Alex Caruso was a very big pickup for them. So the Sixers have a tough test tonight. And then, yeah, like the Hawks, I think, are right there. Knicks look good. Wizards look good. So, I was saying all offseason, this could finally be the year. We've been waiting more than a decade before we could say the East is actually better than the West. So far, I think that might be the case.
Follow him on Twitter at @Toporek. Go download, subscribe to the NBA podcast. And of course, Brian joins us throughout the year, talk about NBA. And hopefully next time we talk, the first question won't be about Ben Simmons, Brian. I appreciate you jumping on.
For sure. I won't hold my breath on that one.
All right. At @Toporek on Twitter. Great stuff from Bryan Toporek here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. That's the end of the show. Thanks to Brian as well as Dave Weinberg for joining us. Sixers versus Bulls tonight. Small ball lineup around Embiid. How's it going to work? We'll tune in next. Tom McGinnis on the call here for Sixers basketball on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig. Have a great night.